We've been exploring the irradiated and destroyed ruins of Washington, D.C., and of course we've extensively explored the haunted and ever so frightening Mojave Wasteland. But now, it's time for us to set our sights on a new adventure, the Commonwealth.
You don't get in. I'm going in. You can't, sir! I love you. Both of you.
We love you too.
Oh my God!
Hello everyone, the Army of Otters here, and welcome to the Unexplored Commonwealth. If you've seen my Unexplored Mojave or Unexplored Capital Wasteland series, then you very well know what to expect out of these videos. If you're new to this series is a series in which we explore various locations across the map, well known, not so well known, marked and unmarked, and we try and figure out what their purpose is, some hidden secrets, maybe real world connections, and of course, that all so glorious loot. So sit back, relax, and today we have a very special episode. Let us explore the Glowing Sea. And before going straight into the video, I just thought I would share some of my thoughts on the Glowing Sea and why I chose it. Now, in-game, in the story, you actually have to visit the Glowing Sea kind of early in the story. And it's a very intimidating place at first. Of course, you have all the radiation, there's Deathclaws, there's scorpions jumping up at you, and of course, ghouls. Now, one thing I wanted to mention is ghouls in this game aesthetically look very different from Fallout 3 and Fallout New Vegas. However, they do act a lot different as well. I wanted to say their appearance to me is kind of a downgrade. However, the way they act, I think, is an upgrade. I think they act very zombie-like, and they're very scary, at least in their movements and the way their bodies kind of fly across as they fling themselves at you. Deathclaws and scorpions, I think, are a slight improvement on past installments. Just Deathclaws are not nearly as intimidating, I guess, in Fallout 4, at least in my opinion. But we'll get into that as we go along. Now, the Glowing Sea itself is really freaking amazing. It's really kind of scary, and it's a really fun place to explore after you finish the main game. Now, later on, I will be creating a new character, but for now, we're using my experienced character that I finished the game with about 2 years ago. Now, I didn't really remember so much about this playthrough of the game, but it was enough, the character was enough to get me through the Glowing Sea on normal difficulty. So without further ado, let's check out all of the locations of the Glowing Sea. So our first stop, as you can see here on the minimap, haven't discovered it yet, but is the edge of the Glowing Sea. It is just north of Vault 95. And this is literally right on the edge of the Glowing Sea with this car bridge above us. Now, there really isn't much at the edge of the Glowing Sea. It's literally just this kind of entrance to the Glowing Sea. However, above us on the bridge, there is a small raider encampment in the back of this truck. There was just one raider here for me and his dog. Pretty easy to kill. So, you know, just a kind of a very weird place to put your camp right next to a mutated hellhole. But hey, more power to you, Mr. Raider. Inside the truck, there is an ammo box that we can loot. And also there is a wooden crate that is also locked and we can unlock it. And there really wasn't much in it. There's one thing of Radaway, so, you know, I guess we'll take it, but, you know, fuck you too for not really giving us good loot. Then there's also a duffel bag with a bunch of pre-war money inside of it. Then as we head into the Glowing Sea by heading towards the south-southwest, we can kind of follow this old road. We can see the blast from the massive nuclear bomb that must have gone off here. Now, throughout the Glowing Sea, you will see these, like, destroyed buildings or just ruins of buildings. And here there was like this kind of pond area, and we can see like the radiation storm has set in. very kind of iconic in Fallout 4. And in this pond of radiation were all of these feral ghouls. And this was a really good entrance to kind of the combat and the atmosphere of the glowing sea. Eventually, this legendary Death Scorpion showed up. He was really difficult to kill, and I have to say, after my experience in the glowing sea, these scorpions are much worse than Deathclaws in my opinion, just because they can burrow into the ground, they can show up at any moment and just attack you. They also have a lot of health. But the combat in the glowing sea is really fun. Obviously, you always have the constant danger of radiation. Sometimes you'll be fighting a Deathclaw, some ghouls show up, or a boat flies out of nowhere. The Deathclaw gets distracted. It's a lot of fun and a really kind of this great combat experience. As we move further south, we can find the Hopesmarch Pentecostal Church. Now, this church, you'll notice, is pretty much buried underground, as are many places located within the glowing sea. Obviously, the time and just the blast of the nuclear bomb, and just, like I said, time, put these buildings to appear to be underground. However, this is actually a real-life phenomenon. As millennia and centuries pass, buildings and old ruins tend to get buried by new occupants or just dust and dirt. So this is actually a pretty common thing with abandoned ruins. But we can still dive into the church, and you want to be careful because this church is really freaking scary. There are feral ghouls that'll come running at you from every which angle as soon as you go in. It's recommended that you go in through the church's tower because then you have nothing at your back. I accidentally fell in and was met with just absolute chaos, but it was also quite fun, with all of the ghouls. It felt really scary, like a real zombie apocalypse. Of course, ghouls aren't really zombies, they're just mutated and feral creatures, but, it's close enough. As we make our way to the base of the church, next to the pedestal here, there is the church safe key. Definitely want to pick that up because the church's safe is a master lock. So we can use that key to easily get inside. As we come to the front door of the church, you'll find this bus, which appears to have been pushed against the church's door by the, dirt or the ground. Who knows exactly why or how it got here, but inside of the bus, there is all kinds of really good loot, so make sure you go in there and take a look. And also be careful because some ghouls might spawn inside of the bus. But the suitcases don't have a whole lot, but the steamer trunk inside does. As we head up to the second floor of the church, we can find the safe over in this corner. Using the key, we can access its content. It has some guns, ammunition, and pre-war money. So, not terrible, but actually not that great for a master lock. After that, we can use the tower to escape from the church. After the church, if we head directly south, we can find the wrecked Vertibird. It is a marked location, kind of weird. There really isn't a whole lot here as far as loot at the wrecked Vertibird. There's actually nothing here. But there is a wrecked Vertibird, obviously, in the ground, and this could possibly just kind of be a small reference to Fallout New Vegas or Fallout 2. But obviously a wrecked Vertibird really isn't that much of a reference, and it's not that special. Of course, the US military used Vertibirds in the pre-war era. A nuclear bomb went off right here, so it makes sense that this wrecked Vertibird is here. So, you can check it out, you can discover it. It does serve as a good fast travel point. And then as we head to the south-southwest of the wrecked Vertibird, we will find, destroyed houses, and also a super-duper Mart. This grocery store is actually inaccessible, but we can see the very top of the grocery store, and it creates a very haunting and kind of terrible image. As you can see here, here's the top of the grocery store, and over here we can actually see what is the parking garage, and it just looks really scary and, really post-apocalyptic in my opinion. Now, while we cannot access Super Duper Mart, we can actually access the parking garage. And I actually have a lot of good memories inside this parking garage because in the basement of the garage, we can find a Deathclaw. So the first time we go in order to access the middle level, we want to go in through this kind of middle door. To access the basement, we want to go in through the top. That might seem counterintuitive, but we'll talk about why. Now, in the middle level, while there is no Deathclaw, there are some feral ghouls. So be ready to fight them, but honestly, they were quite easy to kill. There wasn't very many of them, so go ahead and take them out. And as you can see in front of me, there's this kind of like locked cage or door, and inside we can find some pretty good loot, after of course we have killed the ghouls. And also right here we can find some poor lads, probably made some kind of camp. There's a sleeping bag and maybe like a cooking area. Who knows what happened, but perhaps the feral ghouls are the unfortunate souls who were camping out here. Now inside there is a first aid kit, always worth seeing what they have, and a steamer trunk with all kinds of loot and weapons, so definitely take a look and see what you can get your hands on. Also there is a wooden crate with some more medical supplies, then a toolbox with just a bunch of junk. Then if we head to the roof of the parking garage, we can find an elevator. And somehow, someway, this elevator is still operational, and we can call down the elevator or call up the elevator, and then we can use it to descend to the basement or bottom level of the parking garage. As we come out of the elevator, I just found some really cool propaganda and advertisements, of course, from the pre-war era. I love looking at those posters, adds a lot of character to the game. And then there is the Deathclaw. He was an alpha Deathclaw, and while initially I thought his health was a lot, I got really fortunate when this car blew up because I accidentally shot it, and the car next to it, I unknowingly at this time, I didn't realize, also caught on fire. I backed up, the Deathclaw was on fire, and then the truck exploded, dealing a ton of damage to the Deathclaw. In this little corner, the Deathclaw couldn't get to me, he kind of got stuck. Poor guy, and he died. So, pretty easy to kill actually, if you use these trucks to your advantage. Now down here, there isn't a whole lot besides another one of these steamer trunks, which contains random ammunition, some weapons, pre-war money, and other junk. And there's also a nice Vault Boy work propaganda poster. Now after the super duper Mart parking garage, we can head to the east and we can find this radio tower. Here you can see it on the map, I just kind of took off, just east of the Vertibird Wreckage. Now there really isn't a whole lot at this tower. There is an American flag which has somehow survived 200 years in a nuclear blast, so that's pretty freaking incredible. It's like made out of steel or something. And then as we walk up to the actual radio tower, we get some emergency frequencies and stuff, but truly not a whole lot of interest way out here. We're right on the edge of the glowing sea, but it is another marked location and an interesting point of reference. Then as we move towards the south, I found this really interesting kind of unmarked mining equipment. I couldn't find anything about it online, it's pretty insignificant, but there are some boat flies hovering around above the radioactive water, and honestly, while boat flies really are not that terrifying as far as gameplay-wise, lore-wise, they are actually really scary with the way that they can shoot you with their needles and put their larvae inside of you, and then the larvae grow inside of you, and man, it's really disturbing. But anyways, after kind of just checking out the mining site, we can head further south and we can find the wreckage of a Skylines Flight. This is Skylines Flight 1665. And this plane was pretty huge. It kind of resembles a 747 from our own world. However, there are actual seats within the wings. I don't know how possible that is as far as real-life aircraft. I always thought it was a really kind of cool or creative design choice by the Fallout creators. I've never really seen a plane like that before, so anyways, I always thought that was really cool. But this plane was frickin' huge. There are so many seats, but as you can see, probably everybody died. The impact must have been pretty violent, and the plane is in several pieces. And as you saw earlier to the south, there are some destroyed houses, or the ruins of houses, nearby. So perhaps this plane crashed into a neighborhood right as the nukes were falling. Pretty scary. Now, there are some items of interest within the wreckage. You get like this first aid kit here that had some good healing items within it. Now, there's also a very secret compartment in the luggage portion of the craft, so we'll check that out later. And on the mini-map here, you can see where the location is. It's just southeast of the southern cave. We'll talk more about the caves, of course, later. But for now, let's continue checking out the planes. So if you head up to the cockpit, you can actually find the flight data recorder. I've already discovered it, but it'll be right to the left of the left chair. And here is what the recorder says.
Approaching Boston from the west. We've got heavy winds, but it shouldn't be a problem. Lining up for runway 2 at heading. bright light from the north.
So of course, the pilot saw an atomic bomb detonate to the north, and then the plane probably crashed as a bomb maybe detonated above them or near them. Who knows exactly what happened, but it was probably a quick death. Then if we head to the luggage compartment, we can find a hidden compartment, and we can unlock it. It is a master lock, but if you have high enough lockpick, of course, you can pick it like I did. Now, it is worth mentioning that this lock was really irritating for me, because you have to actually point your cursor at the far right of the lock. If you don't do that, the hidden compartment doesn't show up. I spent way too much time than I care to admit trying to figure out how to open this damn lock, but now you know. And as I was heading towards the cave, I found this lone iBot robot out here, which I thought was really interesting and kind of sad. And then right next to the southern cave was a Deathclaw matriarch. Now, she was pretty difficult to kill. She had a lot of health, but using my critical hits and VATS, I was able to kill it. Also, these boat flies showed up out of nowhere, and for whatever reason, the Deathclaw really didn't like these boat flies and decided to target them over me, which was a very big help. So, thank you, boat flies. Now, the Deathclaws in this game will have this really cool animation as they knock you to the ground if you're in power armor, and then they'll slap you and try to bite you. Now, the cave itself really doesn't have a whole lot inside of it, but the first time you come here, you can find a full suit of Raider power armor with a fusion core inside. So if you're collecting all the different power armors within the game, the southern cave is the place to go. We'll talk more about the northern cave later, but as you can see here on the world map, both locations are just marked cave, despite the fact that they are two different locations. And as we move further to the southwest, we can find O'Neill Family Manufacturing. This is obviously some kind of old manufacturing business, and apparently it repaired broken robots. However, most of it is now buried beneath the ground, kind of like the church that we explored earlier. Now, as we approach, we will find that there is a locked door on top. However, part of the factory's roof has a hole in it, and we can jump in that hole in order to access the factory. Now, there really isn't a whole lot inside of here. There will be some ghouls, so do be careful of them. But there aren't a bunch of them, but this charred feral ghoul was quite difficult to kill. He had a lot of health, but he also gave me a lot of XP, so thank you very much. Now, as we go into the very bottom of the factory, we can find a repair area for power armor, but there's no power armor. And we can find a terminal. The terminal here is the main thing we are after because we can use it to unlock that door on the roof, which is where the good loot is located. Also next to the terminal is an ammunition box, and we can also find the Sentry Bot model kit. Usually it's to the left of the terminal, but maybe something happened, it kind of moved. But make sure you build it, that way you get yourself a nice, very cute Sentry Bot. Now as we come up back to the roof, we will find that the door is open. There are several ghouls within this room, so make sure you kill them, and then after that, well, it might take you a second to kill them like it does me, but after you kill them, including this giant ugly ghoul, then you can take the loot from inside, and of course, just like every other place we've explored so far, the loot will include pre-war money, some junk, ammunition, weapons, grenades, and all of that other good stuff. Now, I do have to compliment the locations within the glowing sea, because sometimes you have to think outside of the box. Most people don't think to go to the very bottom in order to access the very top. Now, here's the location of O'Neill Family Manufacturing, and just to the south is Sentinel Site. But before we go to Sentinel Site, I found a family of Deathclaws right next to O'Neill Family Manufacturing. There was a couple normal Deathclaws, and also a mythic Deathclaw. And I do have to say, the mythic Deathclaw was pretty freaking difficult. And he kind of surprised me. I wasn't ready for him. He just kind of came out of nowhere, and he started attacking my companion, and then he raged at me and hit me. And yeah, it was pretty scary, but thankfully I was next to the factory. And thankfully there's a conveniently placed tree that leads to the roof of O'Neill Family Manufacturing, and I could use this tree to get to safety. Don't know about old Longfellow, but you know, he can just fend for himself. And from up here I was able to use VATS to target the Deathclaw, and slowly I was able to drag down his health in order to kill him. Kind of a really cool encounter with this family of Deathclaws. Now, earlier I said the scorpions are more difficult, and yeah, I do still think that's true. However, this mythic Deathclaw was really freaking difficult, and I've had a lot of fun fighting him and maybe his children. Now, normal Deathclaws in this game I do think are pretty easy, because you can almost one-shot them using a critical, as you saw there. Then, as we make our way on finally to the Sentinel Site, the Sentinel Site is a part of the Brotherhood of Steel questline, so you might be familiar with it during the quest Liberty Reprimed, in which we have to kind of rearm Liberty Prime. A pretty freaking awesome quest, but I'm also not a fan of the Brotherhood of Steel, so hey, it's a double-edged sword. Anyways, as we make our way down, we can find a pretty terrible truth about Sentinel Site. It was actually a nuclear missile silo, and they were kind of testing new technology here, and that is perhaps why the Chinese detonated such a large nuclear warhead at this location. We'll talk more about that warhead later when we visit the actual crater of the nuclear explosion. Now, over here I just shot my gun. You can find a copy of Astoundingly Awesome Tales, issue number 10, so make sure you pick that up when you visit. And as you make your way further into the Sentinel Site, during the quest, Liberty Reprimed, you can take Captain Dunleavy's holotape, which is a pretty haunting account of the events leading up to the Great War.
This is Captain Mitch Dunleavy, 132nd Engineering Corps at Sentinel Site Prescott. All lines of communication are down, and we're tracking multiple inbounds on radar. This is a drill. We need confirmation immediately. We've got a lot of nervous soldiers over here, Command. If this is the big one, they want to head home to their families before it's too late. Some of the inbounds are getting awfully close. Wait a minute. The inbounds are splitting into multiple targets? Oh, hell. This is it, isn't it? May God have mercy on our souls.
Of course, it's easy to just kind of talk about the Great War, but we don't think much about the people that started it or were responsible for it. Here we can see what the people who were responsible for launching the missiles were thinking in the moments leading up to the Great War. It's pretty tragic and kind of sad. Then, as we make our way west of O'Neill Family Manufacturing, I found this Chameleon Deathclaw in what appears to be an old kind of electrical power station area. Not sure what you call it. If you know, put it in the comments below. But this Chameleon Deathclaw was pretty difficult to kill. Kind of blends in with the environment. I mean, hence his name, Chameleon Deathclaw. But me and Longfellow were able to take care of him after a lot of bullets. Of course, we got that pretty cool animation. He put his head into my head, but thanks to my power armor, I'm okay. And after a long battle, just lots of shots, lots of back and forth, we were able to kill the Deathclaw, the Chameleon Deathclaw. And then here's maybe the substation or some kind of electrical facility halfway buried into what appears to be like atomic sludge. And as we move even further west of O'Neill Family Manufacturing, we can find this crashed plane. Kind of a smaller aircraft, maybe some kind of pre-war jet. Not sure, but on top of it we can find military-grade circuit boards, which are good junk items for looting and building up your settlement. Next, you can see the location of the crashed plane, and after this I decided to head towards the Rocky Cave. Now, of course, Rocky Cave is the location during the main quest, which you must visit really far past the edges of the map, and here you can find Virgil. Now, of course, normally Virgil is a super mutant unless you help him out, but since I destroyed the Institute, I had a pretty interesting interaction with him here.
Sorry, Virgil. The Institute's gone. Destroyed.
Oh God. The Institute had done some questionable things, but all those people... I think maybe you should go. For good. I don't want visitors.
So in this playthrough, I sided with the Minutemen, and I destroyed the Institute, which I think morally is probably the best choice, but Virgil didn't like that. I was trying to get his rifle, but he won't give you his rifle unless he's happy with you. After that, we can head to the northeast of Rocky Cave, and we can find the Decrepit Factory. This place is truly decrepit. We have this really old factory that is sinking into the ground. In the middle of the factory is this nuclear radioactive sludge. And if we move up, we can find part of the factory. And there's a skeleton kind of drowning in the sludge, reaching his hand up for help. Be careful going into that sludge without any kind of radioactive protection, because, well, you will die very quickly of radiation poisoning. Then if we head just to the west of the Decrepit Factory and south of the Decayed Reactor site, we can find this crashed bus. And this was probably one of my favorite experiences while experiencing the glowing sea. This is an unmarked location, and I just started shooting this lone ghoul next to the bus. And what transpired after that was about a dozen or so ghouls running out from every which way and just kind of swarming me and Longfellow. The fighting was so chaotic, it was a lot of fun, and it really felt like a zombie horror movie. So that was pretty cool. But this bus is just kind of this random location that has some decent loot. It's kind of difficult to find, but you could see the location earlier, and it's just south of the Decayed Reactor Factory, and you'll probably spot a few ghouls in the area. On the bus, we can find several suitcases. For me, a lot of these had lockpicks, which is a pretty good find, and there's also a steamer trunk near the front, again with ammunition, some grenades, weapons, and other goodies. After that, I decided to head to the Decayed Reactor sites, and there was another Deathclaw chameleon here. At this point, though, I kind of grew tired of fighting these Deathclaws because they take so many bullets. I pulled out my Fat Man, and despite the fact that Longfellow was right next to the Deathclaw, I decided to go ahead and launch my mini nuke and, just get it over with. And thankfully, Longfellow is an absolute badass. He doesn't care about mini nukes, and, he was perfectly fine. After that, we can explore the kind of two, maybe cooling towers for the reactor site. They're in very bad condition. In this building, we can actually find the corpse of a child of Adam. And on his corpse, there is some bottle caps and gamma rounds and radaway, which is pretty good. I'll talk more about this body later, though, when we go explore the crater of Adam and just kind of near this location. But for now, at the reactor site, we can actually find the old, control room. And of course, there was a legendary Death Skull Rad Scorpion that just popped out of nowhere and started attacking me. Now, inside of the control room, we are safe from the Rad Scorpion, so haha, take that, and fight my companion. Now, there really isn't a whole lot of loot inside of here. There is this circuit breaker, and if you go inside of here, it'll set off the alarm. You can use the circuit breaker to turn off the alarm, which, is nice, the peace and quiet. Now, we can finally kill that darn Rad Scorpion. Took a long time, and at this point, my power armor was pretty badly damaged, as you can see on the lower left. So we need to go repair that. But first, I decided to go visit the crater of Adam because, well, there's no enemies here. Now, if you look at the minimap, the crater actually does not match where it is in real life. Kind of interesting, maybe a bit of a mistake or oversight. Doesn't really matter, though. Now, in the crater, we can see this is obviously where the atomic bomb detonated that created this radioactive hellscape. Now, here we can find several members of the Children of Adam, which is kind of this cult that worships radiation. On the second floor of this building, we can find a copy of Astoundingly Awesome Tales, so make sure you take that. Now, something interesting is all of the NPCs at the Crater of Adam are named NPCs. There are no actual Children of Adam except at that Decayed Reactor site. Inside, we can find a single corpse of a child of Adam. Now, some really skilled mathematicians and science people who are way more knowledgeable about nuclear weapons than I am actually did some research to determine how big the bomb must have been to create the glowing sea. And they discovered that it was probably about 100 megatons, which is pretty freaking huge. For example, the largest atomic bomb ever detonated in our timeline is, of course, the Tsar bomb, detonated by the Soviet Union, that had an estimated yield of 50 megatons. This bomb was absolutely massive. It was detonated in 1961, and pretty much there's no practical use for a bomb this powerful, which means whatever was in this location, the Chinese really, really, really wanted to destroy, and, well, I hope they got their target, because that is a metric fuck-ton of TNT. And our next location is the Capsized Factory. This is a factory located just northeast of the crater of Adam. And as the name might imply, this crater is, well, capsized. Now we can find a small hole in the wall towards the bottom, or I guess the top, of the factory. And inside we will find a lot of feral ghouls, so you definitely want to take them out. Now, unfortunately, there really isn't a whole lot in the way of loot inside of the Capsized Factory, but it's still pretty fun to go through. Lots of ghouls, lots of good scares, and we do have an average lock safe, and upon opening it we can find some okay loot, but nothing that spectacular. And as with other places throughout the Glowing Sea, there are of course first aid boxes inside. Make sure you loot them, maybe get some Radaway, some Rad-X. Also on the bottom we can find this kind of caved in part of the factory, and if you walk in you will spawn a leveled ghoul, and for me he was a bloated glowing one. Took a long time to kill him, but it was worth it for the XP. After that I decided to leave the Capsized Factory because there isn't a whole lot inside of it. And if we head towards the northeast, we can find the Northern Cave. Now there really isn't a whole lot of loot in the Northern Cave, however we can find a red rocket stop next to the Northern Cave, and inside of the Red Rocket gas station we can actually find some reprieve from all of the radiation that is in the Glowing Sea. If you go inside you'll find that your radiation is at 0, which in the Glowing Sea is an absolute miracle. However, there really isn't a whole lot of interest in here, but it is kind of cool, just kind of exists, that we have another red rocket within Fallout 4. Now the cave is just a bit south of the red rocket stop. Now that is of course a unmarked location, but the northern cave is marked as cave. We run through, we kill some rad scorpions pretty easy, and then the exit is right by the red rocket rest stop or gas station. After that I decided to head to the Atlantic offices, which is directly north of the crater of Adam. Now this location has changed a lot from the last gen to the new gen update. So they released a new gen update to Fallout 4, which added some newer content and updated a few locations, and the Atlantic offices is one of those locations. Before it was just a bunch of feral ghouls inside of it, like the Capsized Factory. But now there are Enclave soldiers. Turns out the Enclave here are trying to establish a presence in the Commonwealth. Of course, in the canon, they were pretty much destroyed in the Capital Wasteland in Fallout 3. But yeah, they're trying to make their way to the Commonwealth, and now we have to destroy this little outpost. The Enclave are not friendly to us. They are very bad at recruiting new members, or, just being like reasonable people at any level. They're absolutely evil. So we'll go through, we'll kill all of them. It's actually a really fun fight. Lots of different elements going on, and the soldiers are a bit difficult to kill. They have some pretty cool power armor, if I do say so myself, so you can grab a few pieces for your collection. And then we can see the Enclave flag, their barracks, make sure you loot their bodies, and then we have to make our way to the bottom of the facility in order to finish the quest. Right now the building is in lockdown, we cannot escape, we have to go to the bottom, but there are so many waves of soldiers that we first must defeat. And finally, when we get to the bottom, we will find the Enclave Colonel. Now, the Colonel is actually pretty easy to kill. Some VAT shots to the face, and well, he's dead. And we will, of course, take his really cool Colonel outfit on his body. Make sure to loot his body so we can get the Enclave password. And, of course, his outfit, which is very rare, very cool. After that, you can struggle to find the terminal like I did. Then you can find the terminal, access it, and end the lockdown. Now, there are some pretty funny journal entries on this computer. It also details the Enclave's plans and why they're trying to establish a presence within the Commonwealth. But pretty much here it just says, wait, are you trying to access the communications? Are you even allowed to be here? If not, please talk to your superior for disciplinary action, and have a nice day. Pretty humorous. I always love the humor in Fallout games, and we can see it on full display on this Enclave terminal. Also pretty interesting that they want to be in the Commonwealth. Obviously there's a lot of technology. I can understand why they would want to be here. But after that we can make our way to the top of the Atlantic offices, and we'll find a pretty chaotic scene outside. There will be several Enclave soldiers which we have to kill, and there's also an Enclave Vertibird hovering around the building that is trying to murder us. We have to kill everyone in order to finish the quest, so do your best and get on it, shooting those Enclave soldiers in the face. I found that to be the most efficient way to get rid of them. It was just, shooting them in the face, but that makes sense. Headshot. Now, there was also a Deathclaw hanging about. In order to deal with the Deathclaw, I figured the best way was just to use a mini nuke. And yeah, that was the best way to do it. May have damaged my right arm a bit, but hey, it worked out pretty darn well. Now, I do have to say I feel bad for Longfellow because he was fighting a Deathclaw by himself for so long while I was inside just having a nice merry time with the Enclave. So I have to say, this was pretty cool that they updated the game this way, that there are actual Enclave soldiers in the game without any mods. I really enjoyed this experience. It was not something I was expecting. When I saw Enclave soldiers, honestly, I thought I left a mod installed on my Xbox, but no, it really is in the game now. Now, our next location is an abandoned shack, and at first glance, it seems like nothing. But there's actually a lot going on at this shack. It is actually not an abandoned shack. It is Federal Surveillance Center K-21B. And obviously this was used as some kind of government monitoring area in the pre-war era. And this is a very large facility. Now, and there is some stuff of interest inside. If you jump to the very bottom, you can find to the left of this terminal a copy of the US Covert Ops Manual, which is pretty darn good. And then on the terminal itself, it is locked, but if we hack it, we can actually access the protectrons that are guarding this place. However, resetting everything is actually maybe a bad decision because you activate the security system, and after that, the protectrons will leave their little hibernation chambers and they will attack the player characters. I don't know if that was the best choice, but hey, some free XP, and they're pretty easy to kill. Also down here, there is a never-ending supply of power armor, as random power armor will respawn within this frame, so it's a pretty good way to get some power armor if you need it. And after this is the location that I really wanted to explore in the Glowing Sea, and that is the Forgotten Church. This is a location I knew very little about. In fact, I didn't even really know it existed until I looked at a map of Fallout 4 and I was like, wow, there's a random ass location way outside of the boundaries of the map in the middle of nowhere. And yes, if you head west of the abandoned shack, you will find the Forgotten Church. It's pretty similar to the other church in the Glowing Sea. It's largely buried underground, and we have to use a tree to get inside. Inside, though, there were no ghouls to attack me, which is a little bit sad, so maybe the other church is a bit more exciting or a bit more scary, but this church is still pretty cool, and it's a bit outside of the map. Inside, though, there isn't a whole lot. We just have one of those loot boxes, and we can get some random loot, guns, healing items, caps, ammunition, all of that good stuff, but inside is actually pretty safe. However, once you enter, a Deathclaw, a level Deathclaw, will spawn outside. So once you exit, do be prepared to have a fight on your hands. Luckily for me, I had Longfellow with me, and he was able to help out a bit as we fought this Alpha Deathclaw. But yeah, this was a pretty freaking awesome location. It's a bit outside of the boundaries that the map lays down for you, so that's pretty cool. And it's really kind of out of the way. And actually, this location also appears in the Winter of Adam, an expansion for Fallout, the role-playing game that takes place just before the events of Fallout 4. It is described as a half-buried Catholic church in the western part of the Glowing Sea, and it contains the entrance to the Whately research facility through a hatch that has been excavated near the altar. However, none of that latter half is present in Fallout 4. There is no research facility, which is actually quite unfortunate. Too bad they didn't add that little tidbit. And our next location is the Federal Supply Cache, 84 in E, or 84 Northeast. It is just northeast of the Federal Surveillance Center, or the Abandoned Shack. And this location is just kind of a cache of goods. Now, the door actually doesn't really look like a door. I was kind of confused at first, but yeah, there's a door here. And inside we can find some, well, okay or decent loot. There is this locked part of the facility, and if we use the terminal, which I couldn't use in power armor for whatever reason, and after hacking said terminal, we can open the mag locks on that door, and we can access the interior of that room. Now, there really isn't a whole lot of interest inside of here, but yeah, you can take a look and see what you can find. There are some ammo boxes which contain random ammo, medical kits, and all of the likes. There's also a weapons workbench. Now, there was a rad scorpion that, of course, attacked me while I was inside of here. Kind of annoying. But over here, we can find all of these beds, and behind the bed in the left corner, we can find a Nuka-Cola Cherry, which is maybe the best loot item inside of this room. And there you have it. Fallout 4's Glowing Sea. Now, I might want to cover some of these locations more in depth in the future, specifically Sentinel Site, but I hope this gave you a good overview of the Glowing Sea and everything that it has to offer. This was a really fun experience and a fun way to get back into Fallout 4. Now, I do plan to continue making a lot of videos, of course, for Fallout 4, and we're pretty much working on all 3 main single-player Fallout games at this point. At least the 3D versions. Fallout 3, Fallout New Vegas, and Fallout 4. I want to give a huge shout out to everyone who has been supporting this channel and this series. It would not be possible without any of you. And I had so many people recommend Fallout 4, so I'll just post their comments on this video so you guys can see all of the support and all the love we have had for this series. Thank you so freaking much for watching. Honestly, this series has become way more than I ever imagined it to be. Thank you guys so much. As always, if you guys have any recommendations or ideas for future Fallout 4 videos, please post them in the comment section below. I try to read everyone's comments and I always try to reply. Thank you guys so much. You guys are awesome. And thank you so much for watching. And as always, until next time.